The sound of muffled sobbing cut through the stillness of the Texas evening like a knife through leather, and Dalton Irving reined in his mare without a second thought. He had been riding back to Santa Rosa after checking the fence lines on his ranch when he heard it, a sound so full of anguish that it made his chest tighten. The creek ran alongside this stretch of land, bordered by cottonwoods that cast long shadows in the fading light. Dalton dismounted quietly, leading his horse by the reins as he followed the sound through the brush. What he found made him stop in his tracks. A young woman sat on the creek bank, her dark hair falling loose around her shoulders, her dress torn at the sleeve. Her hands covered her face as her whole body shook with tears. Dalton cleared his throat gently, not wanting to startle her, but she jerked her head up anyway. Her eyes, red and swollen, went wide with fear. "Easy now," Dalton said, holding up one hand. "I am not here to hurt you, miss. I just heard you crying and wanted to make sure you were all right." She stared at him for a long moment, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Up close, he could see a bruise forming on her cheekbone, and anger flared hot in his gut. "Tell me who hurt you," he said, his voice low and steady. The woman's lower lip trembled and fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "I cannot," she whispered. "He will kill me if I tell anyone." Dalton crouched down a few feet away from her, giving her space. His mare stood patiently behind him, used to his gentle ways. "My name is Dalton Irving. I own a ranch just outside Santa Rosa, about 3 miles from here. Whatever happened to you, whatever you are running from, I want to help." "Why would you help me?" she asked, her voice hoarse. "You do not even know me." "Because leaving someone in trouble is not something I can do," he replied. "My mama raised me better than that. Now, can you tell me your name?" She hesitated, then wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand. "Delilah Rogers. It is nice to meet you, Delilah, though I wish it were under better circumstances." Dalton studied her face, noting the way she kept glancing over her shoulder. "Are you hurt anywhere besides your face?" Delilah shook her head, then nodded, then seemed to crumple in on herself. "My ribs. He kicked me when I fell." White-hot rage coursed through Dalton's veins, but he kept his voice calm. "We need to get you to the doctor in town. Can you ride?" "I do not have a horse," she said quietly. "I ran on foot." "You can ride with me," Dalton offered. "My mare is gentle as a lamb. She will not mind carrying us both into town." Delilah looked at him with such raw vulnerability that something in his chest twisted. "What if he finds me?" "Who is he, Delilah?" She closed her eyes. "My husband, Marcus Rogers. He owns the mercantile in town. Everyone thinks he is such a fine, upstanding man. They do not know what he is like behind closed doors." Dalton had seen Marcus Rogers around town, a tall man with slicked back hair and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. He always wore expensive suits and acted like he was better than the ranchers and cowboys who came into his store. Dalton had never cared for him, but he had never imagined the man was capable of this. "How long has this been going on?" Dalton asked. "Since we married 2 years ago," Delilah said. "At first it was just words, cruel words. Then he started pushing me, grabbing my arms too hard. Tonight he came home drunk and angrier than I have ever seen him. He beat me for burning the roast, even though I did not burn it. I waited until he passed out, then I ran. I just ran and ran until I could not run anymore." Dalton stood and held out his hand. "You are not going back there. I will make sure of it." "You do not understand," Delilah said, not taking his hand. "He is a powerful man in this town. He knows the sheriff, the mayor, the judge. No one will believe me over him." "Then we will find someone who will," Dalton said firmly. "But first we need to get those ribs looked at. Please, Delilah, let me help you." She looked at his outstretched hand for a long moment, then slowly placed her smaller hand in his. Her fingers were cold and trembling, but Dalton held on gently as he helped her to her feet. She winced as she stood, pressing a hand to her side. "Easy does it," he murmured. He led her to his mare and helped her up into the saddle first, then swung up behind her. Delilah sat stiffly at first, clearly uncomfortable with the proximity, but Dalton kept one arm lightly around her waist to steady her and took the reins with his other hand. "I have got you," he said quietly. "Just lean back if you need to. It is about a half-hour ride into town." As they rode through the gathering dusk, Dalton felt Delilah gradually relax against him. Her head drooped with exhaustion, and by the time they reached the outskirts of Santa Rosa, she was leaning heavily against his chest. He could feel how thin she was beneath her dress, as if she had not been eating properly for some time. The town was quiet as they rode down Main Street. Most folks were home having supper. Dalton guided his mare to Dr. Harrison's house on the edge of town, a modest white building with a lantern burning in the window. He dismounted first, then carefully helped Delilah down. She swayed on her feet, and he kept a steadying hand on her elbow. Dr. Harrison answered the door on the second knock, his wire-rimmed spectacles perched on his nose. He was an older man with kind eyes and a neat gray beard. "Dalton," he said in greeting, then his gaze shifted to Delilah and his expression changed. "Good Lord, what happened?" "She needs help, Doc," Dalton said. "She has been hurt." Dr. Harrison ushered them inside without another word. His wife, Martha, appeared from the kitchen, and her eyes widened at the sight of Delilah's bruised face. "Martha, prepare the examination room," Dr. Harrison said. "Miss, can you walk?" Delilah nodded, though she looked ready to collapse. Martha took her arm gently and led her down the hall. Dr. Harrison turned to Dalton. "What happened to her?" "Her husband beat her," Dalton said bluntly. "Marcus Rogers, the mercantile owner. She ran away from him, and I found her crying by the creek. She says he has been hurting her for 2 years. Dr. Harrison's jaw tightened. "I have treated Mrs. Rogers before. She always had explanations for her injuries. I suspected, but I could never prove anything, and she would never admit it." "She is admitting it now," Dalton said. "She is terrified he will find her. She says he is connected with everyone in town who matters." "The law may be on his side, but decency is not," Dr. Harrison said firmly. "Let me examine her, then we will figure out what to do." Dalton nodded and took a seat in the small waiting room. The minutes crawled by. He kept replaying the image of Delilah sitting by that creek, so broken and afraid. Something about her had touched a place in his heart he thought had closed off after his wife died 5 years ago in childbirth, along with their baby. Since then, Dalton had thrown himself into his ranch work, keeping to himself except for occasional trips into town for supplies. He had convinced himself he was content with his solitary life, but seeing Delilah's pain had awakened something protective and fierce in him. He barely knew her, but he knew he could not let her face this alone. After what felt like an eternity, Dr. Harrison emerged. "She has 2 cracked ribs and severe bruising all over her torso and back. The bruise on her face is the least of her injuries. She is malnourished and exhausted. Martha is making her some broth now. Will she be all right?" Dalton asked, standing. "Physically, she will heal," Dr. Harrison said. "But the emotional wounds run deeper. She is terrified, Dalton. She barely spoke during the examination. She kept asking if we were going to send her back to him." "We cannot do that," Dalton said fiercely. "I will not allow it." Dr. Harrison studied him thoughtfully. "You have a good heart, son, but you need to understand what you are taking on. Marcus Rogers will not let his wife disappear without raising hell. He will use every bit of influence he has to get her back, if only to save face." "Then we need to find a way to protect her," Dalton said. "There must be something we can do legally." In Texas in 1882, a man's wife is considered his property in the eyes of the law, Dr. Harrison said grimly. Even if we could get a judge to hear her case, it would be her word against his. And given his standing in the community, I doubt many would side with her. Dalton ran a hand through his hair in frustration. So she is just supposed to go back to him and let him beat her to death. I did not say that, Dr. Harrison replied. I am simply telling you the reality of the situation. If Delilah wants to be free of Marcus Rogers, she will need to disappear somewhere he cannot find her, or she will need evidence so damning that even his connections cannot save him. Before Dalton could respond, Martha appeared in the doorway. She is asking for you, Dalton. He followed Martha to the examination room. Delilah sat on the edge of a narrow bed, wrapped in a clean shawl. She had been washed, and her hair was brushed back from her face. Without the dirt and tears, Dalton could see how truly beautiful she was. She had delicate features, dark eyes that seemed to hold endless depths, and a mouth made for smiling, though he doubted she had done much of that lately. "How are you feeling?" he asked softly. "Better," she said. "Thank you for bringing me here." "I do not know what I would have done if you had not found me." "You do not need to thank me," Dalton said. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," Delilah said, meeting his eyes. "Most people in this town would have taken me straight back to Marcus. Or they would have looked the other way and pretended they did not see me." Dalton pulled up a chair and sat down. "Dr. Harrison says you have a couple of cracked ribs. You need rest." "I cannot stay here," Delilah said, anxiety creeping into her voice. "When Marcus wakes up and finds me gone, he will come looking for me. This is one of the first places he will check." "Where would you go?" Dalton asked. "I do not know," she admitted, fresh tears welling in her eyes. "I have no family left. My parents died of fever 3 years ago. That is how I ended up marrying Marcus. I had nowhere else to go, no way to support myself. He seemed kind at first. He courted me properly, brought me flowers, said all the right things. I thought I was lucky that such a successful man would want to marry me." "It is not your fault," Dalton said firmly. "None of this is your fault." "Then why do I feel so stupid?" Delilah whispered. "Why did I not see what he really was?" "Because he hid it from you," Dalton said. "Men like that are good at hiding their true nature until they have got you trapped." They sat in silence for a moment, then Dalton made a decision. "Come stay at my ranch." Delilah's eyes widened. "What? My ranch is 3 miles outside of town. I have a spare room. You can stay there while we figure out what to do. It will give you time to heal, and Marcus will not think to look for you there, at least not right away." "I cannot impose on you like that," Delilah protested. "You would not be imposing," Dalton said. "The house is too big for just me anyway, and I promise you will be safe there. I have ranch hands who live in the bunkhouse. They are good men, loyal. If Marcus comes around, he will not get past them." Delilah studied his face, and Dalton found himself hoping she would say yes. The thought of her out there alone, vulnerable, was unbearable. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "You do not know me. You do not owe me anything." Dalton considered his answer carefully. 5 years ago, I lost my wife and baby. She died in childbirth, and there was nothing I could do to save her. I felt helpless then, like I was failing the person I was supposed to protect. I know this is different, but when I saw you by that creek tonight, I felt like maybe this was a chance to do something right, to help someone who needs it. Please, let me do this." Something shifted in Delilah's expression. She reached out tentatively and placed her hand over his. "All right," she said quietly. "I will come to your ranch, but only until I figure out what to do next." Relief washed through Dalton. "That is all I ask." Dr. Harrison agreed to keep Delilah at his house for the night, just until morning. It was too dark to ride out to the ranch safely, and Delilah needed rest. Dalton spent the night in the hayloft of the livery stable, unable to shake the feeling that Marcus Rogers might come looking for his wife at any moment. But the night passed quietly, and when dawn broke over Santa Rosa, Dalton made his way back to Dr. Harrison's house. Martha had prepared a small bundle of clothes for Delilah, donations from her own wardrobe since Delilah had nothing but the torn dress she had been wearing. Delilah looked better in the morning light, though she still moved gingerly because of her ribs. Martha had fed her a good breakfast, and some color had returned to her cheeks. "Ready?" Dalton asked. Delilah nodded, clutching the bundle to her chest. She thanked Dr. Harrison and Martha profusely, and they both wished her well. As Dalton helped her onto his mare, he caught sight of a figure down the street. His blood ran cold. Marcus Rogers was standing outside his mercantile, talking to Sheriff Coleman. Even from a distance, Dalton could see the anger in the man's posture. He was gesturing wildly, and the sheriff was nodding along. "We need to go," Dalton said urgently, swinging up behind Delilah. "Hold on tight." He urged his mare into a quick trot, not fast enough to draw attention but fast enough to get them out of town quickly. Delilah pressed back against him, and he could feel her trembling. "Did he see us?" she asked. "I do not know," Dalton admitted, "but we are not sticking around to find out." They rode hard once they were out of sight of town, Dalton pushing his mare faster than he normally would with a double load. The ranch appeared in the distance, a sprawling collection of buildings nestled in a valley with good grazing land stretching in all directions. Dalton had built it from nothing over the past 10 years, and he was proud of what he had accomplished. As they rode into the yard, two of his ranch hands emerged from the barn. Jack and Tom were brothers, both in their 30s, who had worked for Dalton for the past 3 years. They were hard-working, honest men, and Dalton trusted them completely. "Boss," Jack said in greeting, his eyes going wide when he saw Delilah. "Everything all right?" "This is Delilah," Dalton said, dismounting and helping her down. "She is going to be staying with us for a while. She is in some trouble, and I need you boys to keep an eye out for anyone coming around asking questions about her." Tom's expression darkened. "What kind of trouble?" "The kind that involves a man who thinks he owns people," Dalton said grimly. "If Marcus Rogers or Sheriff Coleman come around, you tell them you have not seen anyone fitting her description. Understand?" "You got it, boss," Jack said, and Tom nodded in agreement. Dalton led Delilah into the main house, a sturdy 2-story structure with a wide porch and real glass windows. Inside, it was simply furnished but clean and comfortable. He had hired a woman from town to come out once a week to help with cleaning and laundry, but otherwise he took care of himself. "The spare room is upstairs, second door on the right," Dalton said. "It is not much, but it has a good bed and a window that gets nice light in the mornings. The washroom is at the end of the hall. You are welcome to anything in the kitchen. Make yourself at home." Delilah looked around the main room, taking in the stone fireplace, the worn but comfortable furniture, the small collection of books on a shelf by the window. "This is a beautiful home," she said softly. "Thank you," Dalton said. "I built most of it myself with some help from the hands. It took a couple of years, but I wanted something that would last." Delilah turned to him, and there were tears in her eyes again. "I do not know how to repay you for this kindness." "You do not need to repay me," Dalton said. "Just focus on healing. That is all I ask." He showed her to the spare room, which was indeed simple but comfortable. There was a bed with a colorful quilt, a dresser, a washstand with a pitcher and basin, and a rocking chair by the window. Delilah set down her bundle of clothes and turned to him with a tentative smile. "It is perfect," she said. "If you need anything, I will be downstairs or out working," Dalton said. "Do not hesitate to ask." He left her to rest and headed back outside. Jack and Tom were waiting by the barn. "So what is the real story?" Jack asked. Dalton told them everything, from finding Delilah by the creek to learning about Marcus Rogers' abuse. Both men listened with growing anger. "That son of a bitch," Tom muttered. "Begging your pardon, boss, but men like that make my blood boil." "Mine too," Dalton said. "Which is why I need you two to help me keep her safe. Rogers has connections in town. If he finds out she is here, he could cause trouble." "We will handle it," Jack said firmly. "Nobody is going to hurt that woman while she is under your roof. You have our word." Dalton spent the day trying to focus on ranch work, but his mind kept drifting back to Delilah. He wondered how she was doing, if she was resting, if she felt safe. Around noon, he went back to the house to make lunch and found her in the kitchen, carefully slicing bread with one hand pressed to her ribs. "You should be resting," he said. She jumped, not having heard him come in. "I wanted to make myself useful. You have been so kind to me." "The least I can do is help with meals." "You are injured," Dalton pointed out gently. "You need to give yourself time to heal." "I have spent the last 2 years being told I am worthless," Delilah said quietly. "I need to feel like I can do something, anything, to earn my keep." Dalton understood that need all too well. After his wife died, he had worked himself to exhaustion every day just to feel like he had a purpose. "All right," he said, "but let me help you. We can make lunch together." They worked side by side in the kitchen, falling into an easy rhythm. Delilah was a skilled cook, despite her injuries, and she showed Dalton a few tricks for making the simple meal of bread, cheese, and cold beef more flavorful. They talked as they worked, carefully avoiding heavy topics. Delilah asked about the ranch, and Dalton found himself telling her stories about his horses, his cattle, the challenges of keeping everything running smoothly. "It sounds like hard work," Delilah said. "It is," Dalton admitted, "but it is honest work and it is mine. I like knowing that what I build here will last, that I am creating something of value." "That must be a good feeling," Delilah said wistfully. "I have never had anything that was truly mine." "You will," Dalton said with conviction. "You will build a new life for yourself, whatever that looks like." They ate lunch on the porch, looking out over the land. It was a beautiful October day, warm but not hot, with a gentle breeze that carried the scent of grass and horses. Delilah seemed to relax in the peaceful surroundings, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. "I had almost forgotten what it felt like to be calm," she said. "These past 2 years, I have been in a constant state of fear, always waiting for the next outburst, the next time I would say or do something wrong." "You were walking on eggshells," Dalton said. "Exactly," Delilah replied. "It is exhausting living like that. Always trying to be perfect, knowing that perfection is impossible and you will be punished for failing anyway." "You are safe here," Dalton said. "I know it is hard to believe that right now, but I promise you, I will do everything in my power to keep you safe." Delilah looked at him with those dark, soulful eyes. "Why do you care so much? You barely know me." Dalton thought about that question. "Maybe because I know what it is like to feel helpless. When my wife was dying, I would have given anything to save her, but there was nothing I could do. With you, there is something I can do. I can give you a safe place, time to heal, a chance to figure out your next step. That might not seem like much, but it feels important." "It is everything," Delilah whispered. "You gave me hope when I thought I had none left." Something passed between them in that moment, a connection that went deeper than words. Dalton felt it in his chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the sun. He found himself wanting to know everything about Delilah, wanting to hear her laugh, wanting to take away the sadness in her eyes. The peace of the moment was shattered by the sound of hoofbeats. Dalton stood quickly, his hand instinctively going to the pistol at his hip. Jack came running from the barn. "Boss, we got company," he called. "Looks like the sheriff and a couple of other men." Dalton's jaw tightened. "Delilah, go inside and stay away from the windows." Fear flashed across her face, but she nodded and hurried into the house. Dalton walked to the edge of the porch as Sheriff Coleman rode into the yard with two deputies. Marcus Rogers was conspicuously absent. "Sheriff," Dalton said evenly. "What brings you out this way?" Sheriff Coleman was a heavy-set man in his 50s with a mustache that drooped over his upper lip. He had been sheriff for as long as Dalton could remember, and while he was not particularly corrupt, he was lazy and easily influenced by those with money and power. "Looking for a missing woman," the sheriff said. "Marcus Rogers filed a report this morning. His wife disappeared last night. He is worried sick about her." "Is that so?" Dalton said, keeping his voice neutral. "Rogers says she has not been in her right mind lately," Sheriff Coleman continued. "Says she gets confused, wanders off. He is afraid she might hurt herself." Dalton felt anger rising in his chest, but he forced it down. "I have not seen any confused women wandering around my property, Sheriff." "Mind if we take a look around?" one of the deputies asked. "I do mind, actually," Dalton said firmly. "You do not have any cause to search my land. If Rogers is so worried about his wife, maybe he should spend less time at the saloon and more time keeping track of her." Sheriff Coleman's expression hardened. "Now see here, Irving. Marcus Rogers is a respected businessman in this town. If he says his wife is missing, then she is missing, and it is my job to find her. Then I suggest you search the areas where a confused woman might actually wander," Dalton said. "Check the creek beds, the roads, the empty buildings in town. But you are not searching my ranch without a warrant." The sheriff and his deputies exchanged glances. "You are being awful defensive for a man who claims he has not seen anything," the deputy said. "I am being protective of my property rights," Dalton corrected, "which is my right as a landowner. Now, unless you have a warrant, I am going to have to ask you to leave." Sheriff Coleman stared at him for a long moment, then sighed. "All right, Irving, but if you do see a woman matching Mrs. Rogers' description, you let me know immediately." "Understood, understood," Dalton said. The sheriff and his men turned their horses and rode off. Dalton stood on the porch until they were out of sight, then went back inside. Delilah was sitting on the floor in the hallway, her arms wrapped around her knees, trembling. "They are gone," Dalton said gently, crouching down beside her. "You are all right." "He is telling people I am insane," Delilah said, her voice shaking. "That is his plan. He is going to say I am out of my mind so that when you or anyone else tries to help me, no one will believe what I say about him." Dalton's hands clenched into fists. It was a smart strategy and a cruel one. If Marcus could convince people that Delilah was mentally unstable, anything she said about his abuse would be dismissed as delusion. "We are not going to let that happen," Dalton said. "How can we stop it?" Delilah asked desperately. "You heard the sheriff. He believes whatever Marcus tells him. Everyone in town does." "Then we will find someone who does not," Dalton said. "There has to be someone who will listen, who will help." Delilah looked up at him with red-rimmed eyes. "What if there is not? What if I am trapped forever?" "You are not trapped," Dalton said firmly. He reached out and gently took her hand. "I will not let you be trapped. I promise you that." Over the next few days, a routine developed. Delilah's ribs slowly began to heal, the bruises fading from purple to yellow-green. She spent her mornings resting and her afternoons helping around the house. She was a talented cook, and meals became something Dalton looked forward to, not just for the food but for the company. They would sit together at the kitchen table, talking about everything and nothing. Dalton learned that Delilah had been a schoolteacher before her parents died. She loved books and learning, and her face lit up when she talked about teaching children to read. He learned that her favorite color was blue, that she was afraid of spiders but not snakes, that she had always wanted to see the ocean even though she had never been farther than 50 miles from Santa Rosa. In turn, Dalton found himself opening up to her in ways he had not with anyone since his wife died. He told her about growing up on a small farm in Missouri, about coming to Texas at 18 with nothing but a horse and a dream. He told her about meeting his wife, Sarah, at a church social, about how they had built the ranch together from nothing. "You must have loved her very much," Delilah said softly one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "I did," Dalton said. "She was a good woman, strong and kind. Losing her nearly broke me. But you kept going," Delilah said. "I did not have much choice," Dalton replied. "The ranch needed me. The animals needed me. Life does not stop just because your heart is broken." "No," Delilah agreed quietly. "It does not." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sky turn from gold to pink to purple. Dalton found himself acutely aware of Delilah's presence beside him, the way a strand of her hair had escaped its pins and curled against her neck, the way her hands rested in her lap, small and delicate but capable. He was falling for her. The realization hit him like a bucket of cold water. It had only been a week since he found her by the creek, but already he could not imagine his days without her in them. He looked forward to her smile, to the sound of her voice, to the way she hummed softly while she cooked. When she was in pain, he felt it in his own chest. When she laughed, which was happening more frequently, it felt like sunshine. But Dalton pushed those feelings down. Delilah was healing from terrible trauma. The last thing she needed was him complicating things with romantic feelings. She needed a friend, a protector, a safe harbor. That was all he could be for her right now, no matter what his heart might want. The following week, Dalton had to go into town for supplies. Delilah had been hiding at the ranch for almost 2 weeks now, and while she seemed to be healing physically, he could see the restlessness in her eyes. She wanted answers, wanted to know what was going to happen to her. "I will ask around," Dalton promised as he prepared to leave. "See if I can find out what Rogers is telling people, what the general mood is." "Be careful," Delilah said, and there was genuine worry in her voice. "If Marcus suspects you are helping me, he could make trouble for you." "Let him try," Dalton said with more confidence than he felt. Santa Rosa was busy when he arrived, the Saturday market in full swing. Dalton hitched his horse outside the general store and tried to act casual as he walked down the street. He could feel eyes on him, whispers following in his wake. Word had spread somehow. People knew something was going on. He was loading supplies into his saddlebags when a familiar voice made him freeze. Dalton Irving. He turned to find Marcus Rogers standing a few feet away. Up close, the man was even more unpleasant than Dalton remembered. He had cold blue eyes and a thin-lipped mouth that curled into what might have been a smile but looked more like a sneer. "Rogers," Dalton said evenly. "I understand the sheriff paid you a visit," Marcus said, his voice deceptively pleasant. "He did. And you claimed you had not seen my wife." "That is correct." Marcus stepped closer, lowering his voice so only Dalton could hear. "I know she is at your ranch, Irving. Do not think you can fool me. The question is, what are you planning to do with her?" Dalton met his gaze steadily. "I do not know what you are talking about." "I could have you arrested for harboring a fugitive," Marcus said. "Delilah is my wife. She belongs to me. You are keeping her against her will." "Funny," Dalton said. "Because from what I understand, the only person who ever kept her against her will was you." Marcus's pleasant facade dropped, revealing the ugly rage beneath. "You have no idea what you are interfering with. That woman is unstable, dangerous even. I have been trying to protect her from herself, but she does not understand that. She runs off, makes up wild stories. Those bruises on her face were not stories, Dalton said quietly. Neither were the cracked ribs. Neither was the fear in her eyes when she talked about you. You are making a mistake, Marcus hissed. I have friends in this town, powerful friends. I can make your life very difficult. You can try, Dalton said, but I am not giving her back to you. Not now, not ever. Marcus's eyes went dead, cold and emotionless as a snake's. We will see about that. He turned and walked away, and Dalton felt a chill run down his spine. This was not over. Marcus Rogers was planning something, and Dalton needed to be ready. He finished loading his supplies and rode back to the ranch, his mind racing. When he arrived, he found Delilah in the kitchen making bread. She looked up as he entered, and her smile faded when she saw his expression. What happened? Dalton told her about his encounter with Marcus. Delilah's face went pale. He knows I am here, she whispered. What are we going to do? We are going to be smart, Dalton said. And careful. I talked to Tom and Jack. They are going to take turns keeping watch at night. If Rogers or anyone else comes around, we will be ready. This is my fault, Delilah said, her voice breaking. I have brought trouble to your door. Maybe I should just leave, go somewhere far away where he cannot find me. No, Dalton said firmly. He crossed the room and took her hands in his. Running will not solve this. Rogers will keep coming after you no matter where you go. We need to face this head on. How? Delilah asked. You said yourself the law will not help me. Then we will find another way, Dalton said. There has to be someone in this town who will stand up to Rogers. We just need to find them. That night, Dalton lay in bed staring at the ceiling, trying to think of a solution. He thought about everyone he knew in Santa Rosa, going through a mental list of who might be sympathetic to Delilah's plight. The sheriff was in Rogers' pocket. The mayor was a coward who cared more about money than justice. The judge was old and set in his ways, unlikely to rule against a husband in favor of a wife. But then Dalton remembered something. There was a lawyer in town, a young man named William Preston, who had moved to Santa Rosa about a year ago. He was fresh out of law school, idealistic and passionate about justice. He had made some enemies by taking on cases that other lawyers would not touch, representing people who could not afford to pay. Maybe, just maybe, he would be willing to help. The next morning, Dalton rode into town again. He found William Preston's office above the saddle shop, a cramped room with law books stacked everywhere and papers covering every available surface. Preston himself was a thin young man with earnest brown eyes and ink stains on his fingers. Mr. Irving, Preston said, standing to shake his hand. What can I do for you? Dalton closed the door and told him everything. He watched Preston's expression change from curiosity to shock to righteous anger as the story unfolded. That bastard, Preston muttered when Dalton finished. Excuse my language, but men like Marcus Rogers make me sick. Using their power and money to abuse those weaker than them, knowing the system will protect them. Can you help her? Dalton asked. Is there any legal recourse? Preston sat back in his chair, steepling his fingers. It is tricky. As I am sure you know, the law heavily favors husbands in these situations. But there are a few options. We could petition for a divorce on the grounds of cruelty. It is a long shot, but if we can get testimony from Dr. Harrison about her injuries, maybe find other people who have witnessed Rogers' behavior, we might have a case. What are the chances of success? Dalton asked. Honestly, maybe 20%, Preston admitted. Divorce is still relatively rare, especially on the grounds of cruelty. Judges are reluctant to grant them, but it is worth trying. What is the other option? Preston hesitated. We could argue that the marriage itself was coerced, that misses. Rogers was not of sound mind when she consented to marry Rogers. If she was in a vulnerable position after her parents' death, if Rogers took advantage of that vulnerability, we might be able to get the marriage annulled. Would that work? Dalton asked. It has a better chance than the divorce petition, Preston said, but we would need Delilah to testify to tell her story in front of a judge. That will not be easy for her. She is stronger than she looks, Dalton said. I do not doubt it, Preston replied. Any woman who survives what she has survived has to be strong. All right, Mr. Irving, I will take her case. Bring her to see me tomorrow and we will start preparing. Hope surged in Dalton's chest for the first time since this whole ordeal began. Thank you, Preston. I cannot tell you what this means. Save your thanks until we actually win, Preston said with a wry smile. This is going to be a fight. Dalton rode back to the ranch with the news. Delilah listened carefully as he explained what Preston had said, and he could see the war of emotions on her face, hope battling with fear, determination struggling against doubt. I do not know if I can do it, she said quietly. Stand up in front of a judge and tell everyone what Marcus did to me. The whole town will know. They will all be looking at me, judging me. They will be seeing your courage, Dalton said. They will be seeing a woman brave enough to stand up for herself. Or they will see a troublemaker, Delilah said. A woman who could not make her marriage work. That is what Marcus will say. He will make me look like the problem. Let him try, Dalton said. Preston is smart. He will know how to counter whatever Rogers throws at you, and you will not be alone in this. I will be right there with you every step of the way. Delilah looked at him with such intensity that it made his breath catch. Why are you doing all this for me? You have already done so much. You do not owe me anything more. Dalton knew he should deflect, should give her the same answer he had before about wanting to help someone in need. But looking into her eyes, he found he could not lie. Because you matter to me, he said simply. More than I ever expected. These past couple of weeks, having you here, getting to know you, it has woken something up in me that I thought died with my wife. I am not asking you for anything, Delilah. I know you have been through hell, and the last thing you need is me complicating things, but I want you to know that I care about you, deeply, and I will fight for you as long as you need me to. Tears spilled down Delilah's cheeks, but she was smiling. You are a good man, Dalton Irving. The best man I have ever known. She stood on her toes and kissed his cheek, a brief, soft touch that sent warmth flooding through him. When she pulled back, her eyes were bright with emotion. I will do it, she said. I will testify, I will tell my story. Because you are right, I cannot keep running. I need to face this, face him, and take my life back. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of preparation. Delilah met with William Preston multiple times, going over every detail of her marriage to Marcus Rogers. It was painful, dredging up all those memories, but Preston was patient and kind. He helped her organize her thoughts, coached her on how to stay calm under pressure, prepared her for the kinds of questions Marcus's lawyer would ask. Dr. Harrison agreed to testify about Delilah's injuries. So did Martha, who had witnessed the state Delilah was in that first night. Preston even found 2 other women in town who were willing to speak anonymously about their own encounters, with Marcus Rogers, one a former shop girl he had cornered in the back room of his mercantile. Another a widow he had tried to coerce into selling her land to him at a fraction of its value. As word spread that Delilah was seeking an annulment, the town split into factions. Some people supported her, whispering encouragement when they saw Dalton in town, leaving anonymous notes of support at Preston's office. But others sided with Marcus, spreading rumors about Delilah being an unstable woman who was trying to destroy a good man's reputation. The tension came to a head one night when someone threw a rock through the window of Dalton's house. Delilah screamed at the crash of breaking glass, and Dalton rushed upstairs to find her huddled on the floor of her room, shaking. He carefully picked his way through the broken glass and wrapped his arms around her. "It is all right," he murmured. "You are safe. I am here." "They hate me," Delilah sobbed. "The whole town hates me." "Not the whole town," Dalton said. "Just the cowards who are too afraid to stand up to Rogers. But there are good people too, people who support you. Do not let the bad ones make you forget that." Jack and Tom heard the commotion and came running from the bunkhouse. They found the rock that had been thrown through the window, a note tied around it with twine. Dalton read it, his jaw clenching. "Go back to your husband where you belong, or next time it will be worse." "We should tell the sheriff," Tom said. "The sheriff will not do anything," Dalton said grimly. "He is in Roger's pocket." "Then what do we do?" Jack asked. "We stay vigilant," Dalton said. "We keep watch and we do not let anyone get close enough to hurt her. The court hearing is in 2 weeks. We just need to keep her safe until then." Those 2 weeks were the longest of Dalton's life. He barely slept, always listening for sounds of trouble. He kept his rifle close and made sure Delilah stayed inside as much as possible. The ranch hands took shifts patrolling the property, and twice they chased off men who were lurking near the house. Delilah grew quieter as the hearing approached. Dalton could see the weight of it pressing down on her. He tried to keep her spirits up, cooking meals with her, reading to her in the evenings, reminding her of all the reasons she was doing this. The night before the hearing, Delilah came downstairs long after dark. Dalton was sitting by the fire, unable to sleep. She sat down beside him, wearing a nightgown with a shawl wrapped around her shoulders. "I am scared," she admitted. "I know," Dalton said. "What if the judge does not believe me? What if he sends me back to Marcus?" "Then we will figure out another plan," Dalton said. "But I truly believe Preston has built a strong case. You have witnesses, you have evidence. The judge would have to be blind not to see the truth." "Judges can be blind when they want to be," Delilah said softly. Dalton took her hand. "Whatever happens tomorrow, you are not going back to him. I promise you that. Even if we have to leave Texas, start over somewhere else, I will not let you go back to that life." Delilah turned to him, her eyes searching his face. "You would do that? Leave your ranch, everything you have built for me?" "In a heartbeat," Dalton said, and he meant it. Something shifted in the air between them. Delilah leaned closer, and Dalton's heart began to race. He could see the pulse fluttering at her throat, could smell the lavender soap she used in her hair. "Dalton," she whispered, "I need you to know something. These past weeks with you have been the happiest of my life. Even with all the fear and uncertainty, even with Marcus trying to destroy me, I have been happy. Because of you. Because you showed me what it is like to be treated with kindness and respect. You showed me what I was missing, what I deserve. You deserve everything good in this world," Dalton said hoarsely. "I want to be free," Delilah said. "Free of Marcus, free of the fear. But I also want to be free to choose my own life, my own path. And if I could choose, Dalton, I would choose to be with you. Not because you saved me, but because you are the kind of man I never knew existed, the kind of man I could love." Dalton's breath caught. "Delilah, I know the timing is terrible," she continued. "I know I have so much healing still to do, but I need you to know how I feel. Before tomorrow, before everything changes, I need you to know." Dalton cupped her face gently in his hands, his thumbs brushing away the tears on her cheeks. "I love you," he said. "I have loved you since the moment I saw you by that creek. I know it is fast, I know it is complicated, but it is true. You have brought light back into my life, Delilah. You have made me feel alive again." "Then kiss me," she whispered. "Please. I need to know what it is like to be kissed by someone who loves me." Dalton leaned in slowly, giving her time to change her mind, but she met him halfway. Their lips touched softly at first, a gentle exploration. But then Delilah's arms went around his neck, and the kiss deepened. It was sweet and passionate and full of promise, everything a first kiss should be. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. Delilah rested her forehead against Dalton's, a smile playing at her lips. "That is what it should be like," she said softly. "That is what I was missing." They sat together by the fire until the flames burned down to embers, holding each other, not needing words. When Delilah finally went back upstairs to try to sleep, Dalton felt both exhilarated and terrified. He had given her his heart, but tomorrow that heart might be broken all over again if the judge ruled against her. The morning of the hearing dawned cold and gray. Delilah dressed in her best dress, one that Martha had altered for her. She pulled her hair back into a severe bun, trying to look composed and respectable. Dalton wore his only suit, brushed and pressed. They rode into town together, neither speaking much. The courthouse was packed when they arrived. It seemed like half of Santa Rosa had turned out to witness the spectacle. Dalton saw Marcus Rogers sitting with his lawyer, a slick-looking man named Thornton who had a reputation for winning cases by any means necessary. William Preston was already there, organizing his papers. He gave Delilah an encouraging nod as she took her seat. Dalton sat right behind her, close enough to offer support but far enough to be respectful. Judge Bernard Hammond entered and everyone stood. Hammond was in his 60s, with white hair and a stern expression. He had been a judge for 20 years and was known for being fair but traditional. Dalton could not tell which way he might lean on this case. The hearing began with Preston laying out the grounds for annulment. He argued that Delilah had been coerced into marriage when she was vulnerable and grieving, that Marcus Rogers had misrepresented himself and his intentions, and that the marriage had been characterized by abuse and cruelty from the beginning. Thornton, Marcus's lawyer, objected at every turn. He painted Delilah as an ungrateful wife who had been given every advantage but could not appreciate it. He suggested she was mentally unstable, prone to hysteria and false accusations. Then came the testimony. Dr. Harrison took the stand first, describing in clinical detail the injuries he had treated when Dalton brought Delilah to him. He showed the judge sketches he had made of the bruising patterns, photographs he had taken of her cracked ribs. "In your professional opinion, Doctor," Preston asked, "could these injuries have been self-inflicted or accidental?" "Absolutely not," Dr. Harrison said firmly. "The pattern and severity of the injuries are consistent with a severe beating. There is no other explanation that makes medical sense." Thornton tried to shake his testimony, suggesting that Delilah could have sustained the injuries in a fall or some other accident, but Dr. Harrison held firm. Martha testified next, describing the state Delilah was in that first night, her terror and pain. Then the two anonymous witnesses gave their testimony from behind a screen, telling their own stories of Marcus Rogers' cruelty and manipulation. Finally, it was Delilah's turn. She walked to the stand with her head held high, though Dalton could see her hands trembling. Preston led her through her story gently, asking questions that allowed her to tell the truth in her own words. Delilah spoke about how Marcus had courted her after her parents died, how he had seemed kind and generous at first. She described how things changed after the wedding, how he became controlling and cruel. She detailed the abuse, the beatings, the constant fear. Her voice shook at times, but she never broke down. She was strong and clear and utterly believable. Then came Thornton's cross-examination. He was brutal, trying to trip her up, suggesting she was lying for money or attention. He insinuated that she had been unfaithful with Dalton, that the whole thing was a scheme to leave her husband for another man. "Is it not true, Mrs. Rogers," Thornton said with a sneer, "that you ran straight into the arms of Mr. Irving? That you have been living in his house, alone with him, for weeks now?" "I have been living in his guest room," Delilah said steadily. "He has shown me nothing but respect and kindness. Convenient that you happen to end up at the ranch of a wealthy, unmarried man," Thornton continued. "Convenient that you are now seeking to end your marriage so you are free to be with him." "I am seeking to end my marriage because my husband beat me within an inch of my life," Delilah said, her voice rising. "Because I lived in constant fear. Because I knew that if I stayed, he would eventually kill me. Mr. Irving saved my life, and yes, I care for him. But that does not change the truth of what Marcus did to me." The courtroom erupted in whispers. Judge Hammond banged his gavel for order. "That is enough, Mr. Thornton. Do you have any more questions for the witness?" Thornton, clearly hoping he had rattled Delilah enough to make her seem unstable, sat down. "No, Your Honor." Marcus Rogers himself took the stand next, and Dalton had to grip the edge of his seat to keep from lunging at the man. Marcus put on a performance worthy of a theater, playing the role of the concerned, heartbroken husband. He claimed Delilah had always been fragile, that he had done his best to care for her, but she had wild moods and made up stories. "I love my wife, Your Honor," Marcus said, his voice breaking convincingly. "I just want her to come home so I can take care of her properly. She needs help, medical help, not a court hearing." Preston tore into him on cross-examination, pointing out inconsistencies in his story, forcing him to admit that, yes, he had struck Delilah, but only in self-defense when she became violent. The excuse was so ridiculous that several people in the courtroom laughed outright. Finally, both sides rested. Judge Hammond called a recess to consider the evidence. Dalton and Delilah waited in a small room with Preston, the minutes ticking by with agonizing slowness. "You did wonderfully," Preston assured Delilah. "You were credible and strong. I could not have asked for better testimony." "But will it be enough?" Delilah asked. "I think so," Preston said. "But with Judge Hammond you never know. He is fair, but he is also traditional. We will just have to wait and see." After 2 hours they were called back into the courtroom. Judge Hammond sat at his bench, his expression unreadable. The entire courtroom fell silent as he began to speak. "I have reviewed the evidence and testimony presented in this case very carefully," Judge Hammond said. "This is not a decision I make lightly. Marriage is a sacred institution, and dissolving it is a serious matter. However, marriage is also meant to be a partnership built on mutual respect and care. What I have heard described in this courtroom is not a marriage. It is imprisonment and abuse." Dalton felt Delilah grab his hand, squeezing tight. "Dr. Harrison's testimony is compelling," the judge continued. "The photographs and medical records clearly show severe injuries consistent with abuse. Mrs. Rogers' testimony was credible and detailed. The anonymous witnesses corroborate a pattern of cruel behavior from Mr. Rogers. On the other hand, Mr. Rogers' testimony was self-serving and contradictory. His claim that he only struck his wife in self-defense is not supported by the evidence." Marcus Rogers had gone pale, his lawyer whispering urgently in his ear. "Therefore," Judge Hammond said, "I am granting the petition for annulment. The marriage between Marcus Rogers and Delilah Rogers is hereby declared null and void. Mrs. Rogers is free to reclaim her maiden name and is no longer bound to Mr. Rogers in any way. Furthermore, I am issuing a restraining order preventing Mr. Rogers from coming within 100 yards of the former Mrs. Rogers. If he violates this order, he will be subject to arrest and prosecution." The courtroom erupted. Delilah burst into tears, but they were tears of relief and joy. Dalton wrapped his arms around her, hardly able to believe it. They had won. She was free. Marcus Rogers stood up, his face twisted with rage. "This is an outrage. That woman is my property." "You cannot just sit down, Mr. Rogers," Judge Hammond said sharply, "or I will hold you in contempt of court. This hearing is adjourned." As they left the courthouse, people crowded around them. Some offered congratulations, others looked disapproving. But Delilah held her head high, walking out into the sunlight a free woman. William Preston was beaming. "We did it," he said. "I honestly did not think Hammond would rule in our favor, but the evidence was too strong to ignore." "Thank you," Delilah said, embracing him. "Thank you so much." "My pleasure," Preston said. "Enjoy your freedom, Delilah. You earned it." As they rode back to the ranch, Delilah could not stop smiling. The weight that had been pressing down on her for 2 years was finally gone. She was free, truly free. "I cannot believe it," she kept saying. "I am actually free." "You are," Dalton said, grinning. "Free to do whatever you want, be whoever you want." Delilah turned to him, her eyes sparkling. "Then I want to be with you, if you will have me." "Have you?" Dalton laughed. "Delilah, I would consider it the greatest honor of my life." When they reached the ranch, Jack and Tom were waiting anxiously. When they saw Delilah's smile, they whooped and hollered, celebrating the victory. That night, Dalton made a special dinner to celebrate. They ate on the porch as the sun set, toasting Delilah's freedom with sweet tea. As darkness fell and the stars came out, they sat together in the rocking chair, Delilah curled against Dalton's chest. "What happens now?" she asked softly. "Now you figure out what you want to do with your life," Dalton said. "You are free to make your own choices." "I want to stay here," Delilah said. "With you, but I do not want to just be a burden or a guest. I want to contribute, to have a purpose." "You could teach again," Dalton suggested. "Santa Rosa could use a good school teacher." "The one they have now is about 100 years old and can barely see the chalkboard," Delilah laughed. "I would love that. I have missed teaching so much." "Then that is what you will do," Dalton said. "We will talk to the town council, get you set up. You will be a wonderful teacher." "And what about us?" Delilah asked, tilting her head up to look at him. "Where do we go from here?" Dalton brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Wherever you want. I am in no rush, Delilah. We can take this as slow as you need. You have been through a lot, and you deserve time to heal, to figure out who you are outside of that marriage." "I already know who I am," Delilah said. "And I know what I want. I want you, Dalton. I want to build a life with you, not because you saved me, but because you are the man I love." "I love you too," Dalton said, his voice rough with emotion. "More than I ever thought I could love anyone again." "Then ask me," Delilah whispered. "Ask me properly." Dalton's heart began to race. He shifted in the chair, then knelt down in front of her. "I do not have a ring yet," he said. "But Delilah, would you do me the incredible honor of becoming my wife? I promise to love you, protect you, and cherish you for the rest of my days. I promise to always treat you as an equal partner, to listen to your thoughts and respect your wishes. I promise to build a life with you that is full of joy and laughter and love." Tears streamed down Delilah's face as she nodded. "Yes," she said. "Yes, Dalton, I will marry you." He stood and pulled her into his arms, kissing her deeply. This kiss was different from the first. It was a promise, a commitment, a beginning. They married 3 months later in a simple ceremony at the church in Santa Rosa. William Preston stood as Dalton's best man, and Martha served as Delilah's matron of honor. The church was full of people who supported them, ranch hands, townspeople who had sided with Delilah during the trial, former students of Delilah's who had come to see their beloved teacher wed. Marcus Rogers was notably absent, having left town shortly after the trial. Rumor had it he had moved to Dallas, where no one knew his shame. Delilah did not care where he went as long as he stayed far away from her. Delilah wore a simple white dress that Martha had helped her make. She looked radiant as she walked down the aisle, her eyes locked on Dalton's. When he took her hand at the altar, he felt like the luckiest man alive. They exchanged vows they had written themselves. Dalton promised to always be her safe harbor, her partner in all things. Delilah promised to bring joy and laughter to their home, to stand by his side through whatever life brought them. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Dalton kissed his bride to thunderous applause. As they walked back down the aisle together, hand in hand, Delilah was beaming. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard and lanterns strung from the trees. There was music and dancing, good food and even better company. Dalton danced with his wife under the stars, thinking about how different his life was from just a few months ago. Happy? He asked as they swayed to the music. Deliriously, Delilah replied. I never thought I could be this happy. I never thought I deserved it. You deserve everything good, Dalton said firmly. And I am going to spend the rest of my life making sure you have it. They spent their wedding night in the ranch house, which now felt complete with Delilah permanently in it. She moved her things from the guest room into Dalton's room, filling the space with her presence. They lay awake long into the night, talking about their dreams for the future. I want children, Delilah said softly. I know that might be scary after what happened to Sarah, but I want to have a family with you. Dalton's chest tightened at the mention of his first wife, but he pushed past the old pain. I want that too, he said. I would be lying if I said I was not afraid, but I want it. With you, I want everything. We will face it together, Delilah said, taking his hand. Whatever comes, we will face it together. Delilah started teaching at the Santa Rosa school that fall. The children adored her, and she threw herself into her work with passion. She organized fundraisers to buy new books for the library, started a reading program for adults in the evenings, and became a beloved figure in the community. Dalton's ranch continued to thrive. With Delilah's help managing the books and correspondence, he was able to expand his herd and hire more hands. They worked side by side, building something beautiful together. A year after their wedding, Delilah discovered she was expecting. Dalton was terrified and thrilled in equal measure. He fussed over her constantly, making sure she was not working too hard, eating enough, getting enough rest. Delilah tolerated his worrying with patience and amusement. I am not made of glass, she would remind him gently. Women have babies all the time. But you are not just any woman, Dalton would reply. You are my woman, and I am not taking any chances. Dr. Harrison agreed to attend the birth, and Martha volunteered to be there to help. As Delilah's belly grew round with their child, Dalton found himself oscillating between joy and terror. He loved seeing the evidence of their love growing inside her, but the memory of losing Sarah haunted him. Delilah sensed his fear and addressed it head-on one evening as they sat together on the porch. I know you are scared, she said, placing his hand on her belly where he could feel the baby kicking. I am scared too, but I am also strong, Dalton. I survived Marcus Rogers. I survived the trial. I will survive this too, we both will. I could not bear to lose you, Dalton admitted. You have become my whole world. You are not going to lose me, Delilah said firmly. I have too much to live for now. I have you, I have this baby, I have a life I love. I am not going anywhere. When Delilah went into labor on a warm spring morning, Dalton nearly panicked. But Dr. Harrison arrived quickly, calm and reassuring. Martha was there too, holding Delilah's hand and coaching her through the contractions. The labor was long and difficult. Dalton paced downstairs, unable to sit still, jumping at every sound. Jack and Tom tried to distract him with talk of ranch business, but he could not focus on anything but what was happening upstairs. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he heard the wail of a newborn baby. His heart stopped. Then Dr. Harrison appeared at the top of the stairs, smiling. "You have a son," he announced, "and mother and baby are both healthy and strong." Dalton took the stairs 3 at a time. He burst into the bedroom to find Delilah propped up against the pillows, exhausted but glowing. In her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in a blanket. She looked up as he entered, tears streaming down her face. "Come meet your son," she whispered. Dalton approached the bed on shaky legs. Delilah pulled back the blanket to reveal a red-faced infant with a shock of dark hair. The baby's eyes were squeezed shut, and his tiny fists waved in the air. "He is perfect," Dalton breathed. "You are perfect. I cannot believe we made him." "What should we name him?" Delilah asked. Dalton thought for a moment. "What about Daniel, after your father?" Fresh tears spilled down Delilah's cheeks. "Yes," she said. "Daniel Irving, it is perfect." Dalton climbed onto the bed beside them, wrapping his arms around his wife and son. In that moment, surrounded by the 2 people he loved most in the world, he felt complete in a way he never had before. Little Daniel was a healthy, happy baby. He had Delilah's dark eyes and Dalton's strong chin. He cried lustily when he was hungry and slept peacefully when he was content. Delilah proved to be a natural mother, and watching her with their son made Dalton fall even more deeply in love with her. Life on the ranch settled into a comfortable rhythm. Delilah took a few months off from teaching to care for Daniel, then hired a woman from town to help with childcare so she could return to the school part-time. Dalton continued to build the ranch, now working even harder to create a legacy for his son. When Daniel was 2 years old, Delilah became pregnant again. This pregnancy was easier than the first, and when the time came, she delivered a healthy baby girl they named Sarah Rose, after Dalton's first wife and Delilah's mother. Dalton held his daughter for the first time and felt like his heart might burst with love. Over the years, they had 2 more children, another son named James and a daughter named Elizabeth. The ranch house was always full of noise and laughter, children running through the halls, toys scattered in every room. It was chaotic and exhausting and absolutely perfect. Delilah continued teaching, becoming one of the most respected educators in the county. Many of her former students went on to successful careers, and they always credited her with inspiring them. Dalton's ranch became one of the most prosperous in the area, known for quality cattle and well-treated workers. They never heard from Marcus Rogers again. Years later, they learned through the grapevine that he had died in a bar fight in Dallas, drunk and alone. Delilah felt nothing when she heard the news, no satisfaction, no relief, just a vague sense that a chapter of her life was finally, completely closed. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Dalton took Delilah back to the creek where he had found her all those years ago. They sat on the bank, watching the water flow by, holding hands. "Do you ever think about that night?" Dalton asked. "When I found you here?" "Sometimes," Delilah said. "It feels like a lifetime ago, like it happened to a different person." "In a way it did," Dalton said. "You are not that frightened, broken woman anymore. You are strong and confident and loved." "Because of you," Delilah said, squeezing his hand. "You saved me, Dalton. Not just that night, but every day since. You showed me what love really is." "You saved me too," Dalton said. "I was just going through the motions before I met you. You brought me back to life, gave me a reason to care again. You gave me a family, a home, a future worth building." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the creek. The water burbled over the rocks, the same sound that had led Dalton to Delilah all those years ago. In the distance, They could hear their children playing at the ranch, Jack and Tom watching over them. "I love you," Delilah said, "more than I ever thought it was possible to love someone." "I love you too," Dalton replied, "and I will keep loving you for the rest of my days." They stayed at the creek until the stars came out, just the two of them, remembering where they had started and marveling at where they had ended up. It had been a difficult journey, full of pain and struggle, but it had led them to each other, and that made every hardship worth it. As they rode back to the ranch together, Delilah leaned back against Dalton's chest, feeling his arms around her, solid and sure. She thought about that terrified woman who had run away from her husband and collapsed by the creek, sobbing and broken. She thought about the kind cowboy who had found her and asked, "Tell me who hurt you." She thought about everything that had happened since that moment, the trial, the healing, the love. Her life now bore no resemblance to the nightmare she had escaped. She had a husband who cherished her, children who adored her, work that fulfilled her, and a community that respected her. She had everything she had ever dreamed of and more. When they arrived home, their children came running to greet them. Daniel, now 10, helped his father with the horses. Sarah Rose, 8, wrapped her arms around her mother's waist. James and Elizabeth, 5 and 3, chattered excitedly about the adventures they had while their parents were gone. Dalton looked at his family gathered in the yard, lit by the warm glow of the lanterns, and felt profound gratitude. He had been given a second chance at happiness, and he had not wasted it. Every day, he tried to be worthy of Delilah's love, to be the kind of husband and father his family deserved. That night, after the children were tucked into bed, Dalton and Delilah sat on the porch together as they did most evenings. They rocked gently in the swing Dalton had built, Delilah's head on his shoulder. "You remember what you promised me on our wedding day?" Delilah asked. "I promised a lot of things," Dalton said with a smile. "You promised to always be my safe harbor," Delilah said, "and you have kept that promise every single day. You are my home, Dalton. Wherever you are, that is where I belong." "And you are mine," Dalton said, kissing the top of her head. "My partner, my love, my everything." They sat together under the stars, comfortable in the silence, secure in their love. Inside the house, their children slept peacefully, safe and loved. Around them, the ranch they had built together stretched out into the darkness, a testament to their hard work and dedication. Years continued to pass. Their children grew up strong and kind, each finding their own path in life. Daniel took over the ranch when Dalton grew older, running it with the same integrity his father had shown. Sarah Rose became a teacher like her mother, opening her own school in a nearby town. James became a veterinarian, caring for animals with skill and compassion. Elizabeth married a kind young lawyer and started a family of her own. Dalton and Delilah grew old together, their hair turning gray, their steps slowing, but their love never diminishing. They spent their later years surrounded by grandchildren, telling stories about the old days, passing on the values they held dear. On their 50th wedding anniversary, their entire family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. There were dozens of people, children, grandchildren, even a few great-grandchildren. The house and yard overflowed with love and laughter. Delilah stood on the porch, surveying the gathering, and felt overwhelmed with emotion. Dalton came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist the way he had done thousands of times over the years. "Quite a turnout," he said. "We built something beautiful," Delilah said, her voice thick with tears. "Look at all these people, all this love." And it all started because a kind cowboy found a broken woman by a creek and decided to help her. "Best decision I ever made," Dalton said. "Finding you changed my life in every way that matters." "We changed each other," Delilah corrected. "We healed each other. We built this life together, brick by brick, day by day. They stood together watching their legacy, the family they had created, the love they had nurtured. It was more than either of them had ever dreamed possible that terrible, wonderful night when their paths first crossed. As the sun set on their anniversary celebration, painting the Texas sky in shades of gold and pink, Dalton and Delilah danced together in the yard. Their grandchildren watched, smiling at the obvious love between the elderly couple. Even after 50 years, the way Dalton looked at Delilah and the way she looked back spoke volumes about the depth of their connection. "I would do it all again," Delilah whispered as they swayed to the music. "Every hardship, every struggle, every tear, because it all led me to you." "And I would find you 1,000 times over," Dalton replied. "In every life, in every world, I would always find you." They kissed softly, and their family erupted in cheers and applause. It was a perfect moment, a culmination of 50 years of love, partnership, and unwavering devotion. When Dalton passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 82, Delilah held his hand and told him she loved him one last time. Though she grieved deeply, she also felt grateful for the incredible life they had shared. She had loved and been loved completely, and that was more than many people could say. Delilah lived 5 more years, spending her time with her children and grandchildren, volunteering at the school, and tending the garden Dalton had planted for her decades ago. She spoke often of her beloved husband, keeping his memory alive for the younger generations. When her time came, she died surrounded by family, slipping away with a smile on her face. Her last words were, "I am coming, Dalton. Wait for me." The whole town turned out for her funeral. Former students, now middle-aged themselves, spoke of how she had changed their lives. Her children and grandchildren shared stories of her strength, her kindness, her unwavering love. The minister spoke of a woman who had survived terrible darkness and emerged into brilliant light, who had taken her second chance and created something beautiful. They buried her next to Dalton on a hill overlooking the ranch, beneath an oak tree they had planted together on their first anniversary. The headstone read, "Delilah Irving, beloved wife, mother, grandmother, and teacher. She chose love." And that was her legacy, a woman who had every reason to give up on love, but chose it anyway. Who took the hand of a kind cowboy and built a life beyond her wildest dreams. Who proved that it is never too late to start over, that healing is possible, and that true love can transform everything. The ranch continued to thrive under Daniel's care, passing down through the generations. The house remained full of love and laughter, just as Dalton and Delilah would have wanted. And sometimes, on quiet evenings, family members swore they could see 2 figures sitting on the porch swing, holding hands and watching the sunset together. The story of how Dalton found Delilah crying at the creek became family legend, told and retold to each new generation. It was a reminder that one act of kindness, one moment of compassion can change everything. That the darkest nights can lead to the brightest dawns. That love, real love, has the power to heal even the deepest wounds. And so the legacy lived on not just in the land they had worked or the children they had raised, but in the love story they had written together. A story that began with tears by a creek and ended with a lifetime of joy. A story that proved, beyond any doubt, that happily ever after is possible for those brave enough to choose it.